Everything seemed buried in the past. But what if it was only the beginning? The thought drifted through Alina Hart's mind as she walked hand in hand with her son across the wide plaza. The autumn sun had dipped low, brushing the marble columns of the library with gold. The world felt calm, deceptively calm, the kind of afternoon where she almost believed she had outrun the shadows that once haunted her. Noah tugged free of her grip, his small sneakers slapping against stone. "Mom, can I run ahead?" he asked, already darting forward, his sketchbook hugged to his chest. "Careful, sweetheart," Alina called, adjusting the strap of her satchel. Her voice carried a note of habit, the constant worry of a mother who had raised a child alone. Noah laughed, the sound bright and unguarded, echoing through the plaza. He darted past a group of tourists, zigzagged between the fountain benches, and then a thud. His small body collided with someone rounding the corner. The sketchbook tumbled, loose papers scattering like startled birds. Noah landed on his knees with a startled yelp. Alina's heart seized. She rushed forward, her heels clacking sharply against the pavement. "I'm so sorry," she began, kneeling to gather the mess. He didn't see where he was going. The words froze on her lips. The man who bent to pick up Noah's sketchbook was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked carved onto him. His dark hair caught the fading light, his profile strong, unmistakable. When he lifted his head, Alina's breath caught, sharp and painful. Adrian Cole, her past, her ruin. The man she had buried on the pages of a novel and sworn never to see again. For 7 years, she had imagined this moment sometimes in nightmares, sometimes in secret daydreams, where she delivered the scathing words she had never spoken. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of his presence, standing flesh and blood before her, the ghost of her scars. "Are you hurt, kid?" His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. He handed Noah the sketchbook, his large hand surprisingly gentle. Noah blinked up at him, wide. "I'm okay," he mumbled, and then it happened. Adrian's gaze locked on the boy. For a second, confusion flickered. Then realization crashed, and his entire body went still. The color drained from his face, his eyes widening as if the earth had shifted beneath his feet, because staring back at him was a reflection, eyes sharp and gray. The exact stormy shade that had once set boardrooms on edge and broken Elena's heart. Elena's stomach twisted. She lunged forward, pulling Noah to her side, as if she could shield him from recognition itself. "Come on, Noah," she said tightly. "We're leaving." But Adrian didn't move. He straightened slowly, his jaw tightening, his gaze never leaving the boy. Alina, her name on his lips, cut deeper than any insult ever had. She snapped her head up, her eyes blazing. Time slowed. She saw the memories overlaying the present, the young CEO who had whispered promises in hidden hallways, the same man who had spat accusations and turned her love into ashes. Her grip on Noah's hand tightened until he whimpered, "Mom, it's fine, sweetheart." Her voice shook, though she forced calm. She turned her body, angling him away. "Let's go." But Noah, ever curious, glanced back over his shoulder. "Mom, do you know him?" The question speared her. She didn't answer, couldn't. Adrian took a step forward, his lips parting. "That's your don't," Alina hissed, her voice low, lethal. The single word stopped him, cold. The air between them crackled with all the things unsaid, the nights of loneliness, the years of survival, the betrayal that had carved her into someone new. Adrian's expression was unreadable, but his eyes blazed with shock, with a dawning horror she had long imagined, yet never wanted to see. Alina turned sharply, pulling Noah with her, her spine rigid as steel. Her heels struck the stone with finality. She would not falter here. Not in front of him. Behind her, Adrian stood rooted, staring at the retreating figures. His fists clenched, his throat tight. He had built empires, crushed competitors, commanded entire industries, yet, in that single moment, he was undone, Because he knew. He knew without a shred of doubt. The boy was his. Alina didn't look back until they were safely in the cab. Noah humming softly beside her, already absorbed in drawing. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing her heartbeat to steady. She had thought it was finished, that she had buried Adrian Cole in her past, turned him into fiction, stripped him of power by writing him into a villain. She had believed success and motherhood had armored her beyond his reach. But tonight, as the city lights blurred past the window, his face burned behind her eyelids. His voice still rang in her ears. And worst of all, she had seen it in his eyes, the instant recognition, the undeniable truth. Everything she had fought to protect, every wall she had built, had shattered in an instant. The past was not dead. It had only been sleeping. And now, it had woken. Nothing was finished. It was only beginning. Alina Hart had not expected much when she first walked through the glass doors of Cole Industries. At 21, armed with a modest scholarship and a resume thinner than paper, she was just another intern hoping the summer might open doors. She wore the same gray skirt twice a week, rotated 2 blouses, and clutched her mother's old leather bag like it was armor. The lobby was a cathedral of power, marble floors that reflected the skyline, steel beams that climbed toward the heavens, and employees who moved like currents in a river, brisk and self-assured. Alina felt invisible among them, a speck swallowed by grandeur, until she saw him, Adrian Cole. He was younger than she, expected a CEO to be barely past 30, tall and commanding, his presence consuming the space like a storm. Rumors swirled about him, ruthless in negotiations, untouchable in wealth, cold to everyone who dared get close. But in that first moment, Alina didn't see ruthlessness. She saw a man who carried the world on his shoulders, a weight no one else could see. Their eyes met as he strode through the lobby, flanked by executives. For a fraction of a second, his gaze lingered on her. It startled her so much she nearly dropped her bag. She told herself it meant nothing, but it didn't end there. A week later, she was assigned to shadow in the marketing division. Most interns fetched coffee, but Alina had a knack for strategy, for noticing details others overlooked. Her suggestions were small, hesitant at first, yet sharp. One afternoon, Adrian himself dropped in on a meeting, and she watched him dismantle a proposal with surgical precision. When she timidly raised her hand, the room went still. "You have an idea?" he asked, his tone clipped, skeptical. Alina swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I think the campaign misses the emotional hook. People don't just buy luxury, they buy the story of who they could be. If you shifted the focus." She faltered, heat rushing to her cheeks. Adrian regarded her in silence. Then, to everyone's shock, he nodded once. "Show me." That was the beginning. Days blurred into evenings. Adrian started calling her into strategy sessions, sometimes alone. He questioned her ideas, pushed her limits, forced her to think faster, deeper, and slowly, the sharp edges of his reputation softened when she was near. He listened. He even smiled, rare and fleeting, but real. One night, after a 12-hour grind, preparing for a merger, Alina found herself standing beside him at the top floor's window wall. The city glowed beneath them, endless and alive. "You don't scare easily," he said, his voice low. She hugged her bag tighter. "I'm terrified half the time." His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Then you hide it well." Silence stretched, electric. Her pulse hammered in her throat. When his hand brushed hers, it felt like falling and flying at once. By the end of summer, their secret had bloomed. It was fragile, hidden in late-night offices and whispered phone calls, but it was real. Adrian, the untouchable billionaire, had let down his guard for an intern who owned nothing but dreams. Alina had never been happier. She didn't know happiness had an expiration date. Selena Vance had always moved through Cole Industries as if the building belonged to her. with her designer heels clicking across the marble, her flawless hair sculpted to perfection, and a smile sharpened into a weapon. She was admired and feared in equal measure, born into wealth, educated at the best schools. She carried entitlement like perfume, subtle, yet suffocating, and she wanted Adrian Cole for years. Selena had positioned herself within his orbit, arranging board dinners, volunteering for projects he oversaw, making herself indispensable. She imagined her beauty, her pedigree, her ambition would make her the perfect match for a man like him. But Adrian never looked twice. Not until he started looking at Alina Hart. Selena noticed the shift immediately. The way Adrian lingered in meetings where Alina spoke, the rare curve of his lips when she dared challenge him, the hushed conversations behind closed doors. It was intolerable. Selena couldn't fathom how a nobody intern with second-hand clothes had captured what she had pursued for years. Envy curdled into obsession. She started small, whispers in the break room, raised brows when Elena's name came up. "She's ambitious," Selena would murmur, "but isn't it strange how quickly she's risen? Almost calculated." Her words dripped like poison, subtle enough to pass as observation, but poison wasn't enough. One evening, Selena staged her masterpiece. She slipped into Adrian's office after hours, careful as a thief. From her bag, she pulled documents, photocopied contracts, forged emails painting Alina as a manipulator. In these fabricated messages, Alina appeared to barter her relationship with Adrian in exchange for a lucrative consulting deal for a struggling family acquaintance. The story was neat, believable, damning. She left the folder on Adrian's desk, perfectly placed where he would see it first thing in the morning. Adrian found it just as she intended. At first, he dismissed it. Alina scheming. Impossible. She was too earnest, too transparent. But as he scanned the pages, doubt seeped in. The contracts bore his company's letterhead. The emails carried timestamps that matched nights he remembered her leaving late. Adrian's chest tightened. Could he have been so blind? The memory of their first kiss flickered her trembling smile. The way she whispered she had never felt so alive. Was it real? Or had she been performing all along? He told himself to confront her, to ask. But pride was a crueler master than love. That night, when Alina arrived at his penthouse with takeout containers and shy laughter, Adrian was waiting with the folders spread across the glass coffee table. "What is this?" His voice was sharp enough to cut steel. Alina blinked, confused. What do you mean?" "Don't play innocent." He shoved the forged emails toward her. "You think I wouldn't find out? That you could crawl into my bed and barter contracts behind my back?" Her face went white. "Adrian, no, this isn't me. I don't even know what these are. Don't lie to me." His roar reverberated off marble walls. "You wanted power, and you used me to get it. God, I should have known." Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for his hand. "Please, listen." "I would never." He yanked away as if burned. Every tender memory they had shared twisted in his mind, warped into evidence of manipulation. Her late nights, her clever insights, her shy kisses, had it all been a performance? Adrian's pride whispered yes. Alina's sobs echoed as he turned his back, his voice ice. "Get out, before I forget how merciful I can be." She staggered to the door, clutching her bag like a shield. The folder remained on the table, a monument to betrayal neither of them could see beyond. As the elevator doors closed on her tear-streaked face, Adrian's chest burned not with relief, but with something he refused to name. The rumor mill at Coal Industries moved with the speed of wildfire, in an age where gossip could be packaged and sold as news within hours. Selena's little masterpiece did what she intended. It spread. Photocopies of forged emails and doctored contracts showed up on tabletops and in office chatter turned from water-cooler small talk to a slow, poisonous current that curled through the halls and up into boardrooms. Alina tried to keep working as if the world hadn't shifted under her feet. She answered emails, revised decks, stayed late, and left early. But every glance felt like a spotlight. Every deliberate silence felt like a jury. Friends who had been casual allies moved away when she passed. Awkward smiles and lowered eyes their only excuse. It was as though the building itself conspired to unmake her. Then came the conference. It was supposed to be a triumph of the year, a gala where Adrian would present the new strategic vision and where the company would celebrate its latest mergers. The hall had been rented, the lighting rehearsed, the speeches carefully choreographed. Alina, against her better judgment, attended. She told herself she would be invisible, a shadow in the crowd. She believed in professionalism, in not giving drama fuel. But truth is a temperamental thing. It surfaces at its own hour. Adrian took the stage under a roar of applause. He looked every inch the man the press adored, composed, charismatic, untouchable. Selina sat near the front, the picture of triumph, her smile too bright, her fingers laced together in a practiced pose. Alina stood at the back, clutching a flute of champagne with white-knuckle fingers, watching the man who had once been tender and later cruel. When he finished the prepared remarks, Adrian asked for a moment to speak off script. The murmur of anticipation, Roseanne's unscripted address would be news. Elena's pulse kept time with the room's hush. "I've learned many hard things this year," Adrian began, voice clear and steady. "I've learned who works for the company and who works it. I've learned the difference between allegiance and calculation." A few polite chuckles. Then his jaw hardened. "There is a matter I must address. Because integrity is not a value I negotiate." He turned slightly and, as if by design, nodded toward the back of the room where Alina was standing. The echo in the room swallowed the breath from her. "You must all be familiar with the recent," his hand flicked, as though dismissing the documents that had circulated. "Inflammatory allegations that have been circulating about one of our team. They are ugly. They are corrosive. And I will not stand by while falsehood is used as a weapon." Alina felt relief, like a cool hand. He disavows the documents, she thought. Relief that was almost dizzying. She let herself draw in a hopeful breath. Then he said her name. "Alina Hart," Adrian said, and his voice lost the public polish it had worn a moment before. It was stripped raw. "You have been in my orbit. You have been given opportunities. You have been seen." A hush pressed on the room. People leaned forward. Alina put the flute to her lips and tasted salt. "You have also been opportunistic," he continued, "and for that, there must be accountability. Not everyone who smiles at the company's table does so with our best interests at heart." He paused, like a man coaxing a confession out of some reluctant truth. "I will not have someone who courts favor with flattery and then seeks to bargain with my company dressing themselves as trust. There is no room for cheapness in places where trust is currency." The word landed like a stone. Elena's mouth went dry. Around her, the room shifted. Whispers spidered outward, like a living thing. She watched faces, colleagues whose nods had once been friendly, now cocked with interest. Managers who gauged their own positions against the unfolding spectacle. Selina's smile was a slow, triumphant sunrise. Elena's knees trembled. She set down the flute and moved toward the exit, her hand fumbling for a coat that had become heavier in her hold. The press noticed. Lenses turned. Light bulbs flashed. A dozen recordings captured the silhouette of a woman leaving in humiliation. Someone in the crowd applauded. It sounded like a guillotine. Outside the gala, the city's cold air hit her face like reality. She stumbled to the cab stand, hands shaking as she gave an address. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, sharp and hot. She forced them back because the humiliation felt private and the worst. Way exposed and reduced to a single word: cheap. She had come to the company hoping to learn, to contribute. She had fallen in love with a man who had once seen her as more than surface. Now she was a parable, a lesson delivered with polite cruelty. She didn't remember stepping into her apartment. The elevator dinged. The door sighed open. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to let go. She sank to the floor, knees to chest, the expensive dress a-ragged against the hardwood. The world she had held a job, a lover, a threadbare sense of belonging, felt severed like a snapped rope. All night she sat with the echo of his voice. She replayed every tender thing he'd said, trying to reconcile it with the attack in front of the room. She replayed the folder on his table, the way he'd shown her the falsified documents earlier in the week. Could she have fooled him? Could she have woken every morning pretending to be someone she wasn't? The questions came like small knives. When morning dawned, the hangover tasted like disgrace. She climbed, hair tangled, into the shower and let the hot water wash the night off. Standing there, bare to the world, she felt the weight of loneliness like a physical thing. An image rose uninvited from some corner of her memory, the warmth of Adrian's palm on her cheek, the way he had said her name with curiosity and the softness of someone who noticed. That image snapped like a thread when she remembered his public condemnation. She needed to leave the city. The apartment, with its fine view and fine walls, had become a mausoleum. She packed hurriedly, a few changes of clothes, her mother's faded scarf, a manuscript she had not yet finished, a small, private thing that existed like a second heartbeat. She left a terse message on Nathan's old number, the neighbor who had once offered to take in a stray cat and now would unknowingly shelter her. Going away for a while. Don't try to contact me. She hit send before she could add anything softer. 2 days on the road, a flannel motel bed, stiff coffee life, contracted 2 small, manageable tasks, and then came the nausea. It began with a single morning, when bread tasted wrong and the sunlight felt too sharp. She blamed stress, the leftover ghosts of last night's humiliation. But the sickness returned, persistent and insistent, a tide that would not recede. For 3 days, she avoided the clinic, fingers trembling as she walked past a pharmacy and reached for a paper test. The little window held its secret in the way secrets do, silently, with a small, luminous authority. 2 lines, a tiny chemical truth that would reroute the maps of her life. Alina sat down slowly on the curb outside, the pharmacy's automatic doors sighing like someone crossing a threshold. Her knees went numb. The city stream moved around her, people blinking and scrolling and living their steady lives. She pressed trembling fingers to the small, plastic stick and then to her belly as she let the truth settle. She closed her eyes and felt the weight of that moment in a different way, not as ruin, but as inevitability. The man who had shredded her life had also, unwittingly, left a living, breathing remnant of their time together. It was a complicated inheritance, a wound that had produced new life, and in that strange, uncertain clarity, Alina made a small, stubborn choice. She would not allow this latest act of cruelty, this public annihilation, to be the last word of her story. She would keep what she had inside, and she would protect it. For now, the world could see her as cheap. Tomorrow, she thought, she would write a different definition. The paper test had been blunt, merciless in its clarity. To pink lines, glaring like truth she hadn't asked for. Alina had stared at them in the cramped motel bathroom, the hum of the fluorescent bulb above filling the silence her heart refused to break. Bought pregnant. The word felt foreign on her tongue, heavy and sacred at once. She sat on the edge of the tub, hands trembling, mind fractured. Images tumbled through her, Adrian's eyes dark with fury. The cold marble of his penthouse, the word cheap, spat like a verdict. He had thrown her away. And now this. For hours, she argued with herself. Could she raise a child alone? Could she bear the stares, the whispers, the certainty that people would believe the worst? She had no savings, no family close enough to lean on. Everything about it seemed impossible, and yet, when she pressed a tentative palm to her flat stomach, something inside her shifted. She remembered her own childhood, the days when her mother had worked 2 jobs and still made time to tuck her in at night. Her mother had carried the world alone. Maybe Alina could too. The decision wasn't sudden, nor was it dramatic. It was quiet, forged in the stillness of a motel bathroom. She would keep the baby, whatever it cost her, whatever future it erased. She would not discard the one good thing left from a love gone rotten. The weeks that followed became a blur of survival. She moved to a smaller town, hours outside the city, renting a shoebox apartment above a laundromat. The place smelled of detergent and fried food from the diner downstairs, but it was hers. The walls were thin, the carpet stained, yet when she lay on the mattress on the floor, she felt the faint pulse of possibility. Money was scarce. She took on whatever work she could find, waiting tables during the lunch rush, scrubbing offices at night, filing paperwork for a doctor's office on weekends. Each job left her body aching, but she kept moving. One day bleeding into the next, morning sickness clung to her like a cruel joke. She would duck into back hallways at the diner, gripping the sink until the wave passed, then paste on a smile and carry another tray of pancakes. Customers never noticed the sweat at her temples, the way her hands shook at night when exhaustion pinned her to the mattress. She whispered to the life inside her. "We're going to make it," she said softly, a vow to the emptiness. "You and me." The first time she heard the heartbeat at the clinic, faint and rapid, tears slipped silently down her cheeks. It was real. It was undeniable. And for the first time in months, she felt something other than grief. She began writing again. At first, it was scattered sentences on napkins, scribbled observations in the margins of receipt paper. But slowly, the words gathered, shaped by her pain and her fragile hope. Stories of women wronged and silenced, stories of survival and scars that gleamed like metals. Writing became her anchor. The city she had left behind carried on without her. Adrian's name still appeared in the business section of the newspaper, headlines about acquisitions and record profits. Sometimes she caught his photograph, always immaculate, always distant hand, her stomach twisted. She forced herself to look away, reminding herself that the man in the paper had no place in her future. Her future was curled beneath her ribs, growing stronger every day. By the 7th month, Elena's body felt like a battlefield. Her ankles swelled, her back screamed each time she bent, and the diner's greasy air made her nauseous, even after the morning sickness had passed. Every dollar she earned seemed to vanish as quickly as it arrived: rent, groceries, the occasional clinic bill. She learned to stretch soup into 3 meals. 2 wash clothes in the sink when coins for the laundromat ran out. The people in town mostly kept to themselves. They nodded when she passed, sometimes offered a tired smile, but no one asked questions. She was grateful. She didn't want pity, and she certainly didn't want anyone to know the truth of who the father was. That name had no place here, but loneliness pressed on her ribs like a weight. Nights were the worst, when she lay awake in the narrow bed, listening to the buzz of the neon sign from the laundromat below, feeling the baby twist and roll inside her. She whispered promises into the dark, though she wasn't sure she believed them herself. One icy February evening, she nearly collapsed on the stairs. Her shift had run late, and the climb to her apartment felt like scaling a mountain. She paused halfway, gripping the railing, her vision swimming. "You okay there?" The voice startled her. She turned to see a man leaning against the landing below, arms full of groceries. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that caught the light even in the dim stairwell. "I'm fine," she lied, breathless. He raised a brow. "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to topple over." Without waiting for permission, he set his bags down and moved to steady her elbow. She stiffened at the touch. Trust did not come easily anymore. "Just let me help you up the stairs," he said gently, as if reading her fear. I live across the hall. Nathan Cole. No relation? She asked before she could stop herself. The surname hit like an echo. He chuckled. Not unless I've secretly inherited $1 billion empire. Which, judging from my paycheck, I haven't. Something in his tone, rise self-deprecating, eased her tension. She allowed him to guide her up the remaining steps. Once inside her apartment, she muttered a thank you, embarrassed by the peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture. Nathan glanced around, but didn't comment. He only asked, "Do you need anything? Extra groceries? I cook too much for one person anyway. I'm managing," she said quickly, pride flaring. He didn't push. "All right, but if you change your mind, 3B knock any time." After he left, Alina sank onto the couch, one hand over her belly. The baby kicked beneath her palm, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of relief. Maybe kindness hadn't vanished entirely from the world. Nathan became a quiet presence after that. He never intruded, but he always seemed to appear at the right moment, a bag of oranges left at her door, a snow-shoveled path on mornings when the drifts piled high. Once, when the light in her apartment went out, he appeared with a toolbox, whistling softly as he replaced the bulb. "You don't owe me explanations," he said when she fumbled for an excuse about her situation. "We all fight our battles. I just figure nobody should fight alone." Those words burrowed into her chest. She didn't tell him about Adrian. She didn't tell him about the gala, or the humiliation, or the betrayal that still burned like acid when she let herself remember. Nathan didn't ask. He simply stood in the doorway when she needed balance. And sometimes that was enough. On a rainy night in March, the contractions began. They were early, sharp, rolling through her body like waves. Panic surged as she clutched the counter, realizing she had no plan, no one to call. Then the knock came. "Aline, I heard something. Are you okay?" Nathan's voice cut through the pain. By the time he stepped inside, she was doubled over, sweat dripping down her temple. His expression shifted instantly, concern without hesitation. "We need to get you to the hospital." Now, she wanted to argue, to say she could manage, but the next contraction stole her breath. Nathan grabbed her coat, wrapped it around her, and half carried her down the stairs into the storm. The ride to the hospital, blurred headlights slicing through rain. Nathan's steady hand gripping hers, his voice murmuring encouragement she barely heard. When the nurse rushed her into a room, Nathan was the one who filled out paperwork, his handwriting bold where hers trembled. Hours later, when Noah's first cry split the sterile air, Alina wept into her pillow. Exhaustion swallowed her, but relief surged like light through cracks. Her son, her miracle. Through bleary eyes, she glimpsed Nathan in the corner, holding the tiny bundle with a reverence that stole her breath. He looked up, and their eyes met. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. In that moment, Alina understood. Fate had stripped her of one man, but it had placed another in her path, not as replacement, but as proof that gentleness still existed. The first weeks after Noah's birth blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and fragile mornings. Alina had thought pregnancy was hard, but nothing prepared her for the storm of motherhood. Feedings every 2 hours, diapers piling faster than she could wash them, the constant ache in her back from rocking him to sleep in the dim light of the apartment. There were moments when exhaustion hollowed her out, when she stood over the crib swaying like a branch, tears streaking down her face as Noah wailed. In those moments, she questioned everything, her strength, her choices, whether she had doomed her child by bringing him into a life so precarious. But then Noah would grip her finger with his impossibly tiny hand, his eyes blinking up at her with newborn innocence, and the doubt cracked. Love surged through her like something elemental, fierce enough to steady her legs. Nathan became part of the rhythm without ever demanding a role. He appeared with groceries, milk, bread, once even a box of diapers she couldn't afford. When she protested, cheeks burning, he shrugged. Consider it a neighborly investment, he said, smiling. Sometimes he'd drop by in the evenings, offering to rock Noah so she could shower or simply breathe. She learned the sound of his laugh, warm and disarming, as he made faces at the baby. Coaxing giggles that melted the fatigue from her bones. Alina had built walls around herself after Adrian. Walls of mistrust and bitterness, but Nathan didn't try to scale them. He simply stood on the other side, steady and patient, as if saying, "When you're ready, I'll still be here." Once, in the quiet after midnight, when Noah finally slept and the rain pattered against the window, Alina found herself whispering the truth. "I thought I loved someone once," she confessed, her voice barely carrying. "I thought it was forever, but it turned into humiliation, betrayal. I left with nothing." Nathan didn't interrupt, didn't probe for details. He only said, "Then it sounds like you've already survived the hardest part." She met his gaze in the half-light. There was no pity there, only recognition, like he understood the shape of broken things. Maybe because he'd carried some of his own. Amid the chaos of motherhood, Elena's writing deepened. She scribbled during Noah's naps, tapping away on an old second-hand laptop she'd bought with tips from the diner. Her words no longer fit on scraps of paper. They demanded chapters, characters, arcs of survival and redemption. She poured her pain into fiction, shaping heroines who faced betrayal and rose stronger. Sometimes she barely recognized the words until she reread them, raw and blazing on the screen. Writing became more than therapy, it became her compass, her way of proving to herself that she was not defined by the cruelty of one man. Nathan encouraged her quietly. When she confessed her dream of finishing a manuscript, he said, "Then finish it. Even if no one reads it, finish it for yourself. Give your story somewhere to live outside your chest." His faith startled her. Adrian had once praised her ideas in boardrooms, but always with calculation, always measuring what her brilliance could do for him. Nathan's support was different. It wasn't transactional. It was simple, honest belief. On the hardest nights, when the baby cried inconsolably and Alina felt like she was unraveling, Nathan would knock on the door. "Take 5 minutes," he'd say softly, reaching for Noah with practiced arms. She would sink onto the couch, close her eyes, and breathe, knowing she wasn't alone. Months passed. Spring warmed the streets, and Noah's laughter filled the tiny apartment. Alina adjusted to the rhythm of motherhood, the constant giving, the exhaustion, the fierce joy. One afternoon, as she sat at the small desk Nathan had salvaged from a thrift store, Noah babbling on a blanket nearby, she finished the last chapter of her first draft. She stared at the blinking cursor, then typed the final sentence with trembling fingers. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from pride. She had created something out of ruin, a child, a story, a new life stitched together with resilience. Alina printed the pages and stacked them carefully, her hands shaking as if the words might shatter. She thought of Adrian for the first time in weeks, not the man himself, but the shadow he had cast, and she realized something profound. He no longer owned her story. Noah did. She did. When Nathan stopped by that evening, carrying a bag of takeout, she handed him the stack. "It's rough, probably terrible, but it's mine." He flipped through the pages reverently, then looked up at her with a smile that warmed her bones. "It's not terrible," he said. "It's the beginning of something." And for the first time in years, Alina believed him. 7 years had passed, but Alina sometimes felt she still carried the echo of that gala night in her bones. The sting of Adrian's words had faded with time, but scars had a way of remembering. She bore them quietly, like a constellation only she could trace. Life had remade itself in unexpected ways. Her apartment above the laundromat had been replaced by a modest townhouse, sunlight streaming through its wide windows. The walls no longer smelled of detergent and grease. Instead, they smelled of paper and ink, of the manuscripts stacked on her desk. Against all odds, her writing had taken flight. What began as scattered sentences during Noah's naps became her first novel, then a second. Publishers had noticed. Reviewers called her work raw, unflinching, luminous with resilience. Readers wrote letters, telling her they had seen themselves in her heroines, that her words had given them courage. But to Alina, the success was secondary. What mattered was the way Noah's laughter filled the rooms, the way his drawings cluttered the fridge, the way he curled against her side with a book before bed. He was 8 now, curious and bright, with storm-gray eyes that sometimes startled her. Those eyes were the only trace of Adrian she allowed herself to see. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Alina and Noah strolled through the plaza near the library. The sun hung low, gilding the stone walkways in amber. Noah carried his sketchbook under one arm, chattering about superheroes and dragons. "Can we get hot chocolate after?" he asked, hopping over a crack in the pavement. "If you finish your homework tonight," Alina replied, her lips twitching into a smile. He grinned and darted ahead, his sneakers thudding on the stone. Alina called after him, half worried, half amused. For a moment, she let herself breathe, thinking how far they had come, how ordinary happiness could be. Then it happened. Noah rounded a corner too quickly, colliding with a man emerging from the opposite side. The impact sent the sketchbook tumbling, papers scattering like leaves. Noah landed hard on his knees. Alina's heart lurched. She hurried forward, already calling, "I'm so sorry." He didn't see where he was going. The words faltered. The man who bent to pick up the sketchbook was tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored suit catching the light. His hair was darker now, with threads of silver at the temples. But the sharpness of his profile was unmistakable. Adrian Cole. Time folded in on itself. 7 years dissolved, and Alina was once again the trembling intern in the marble lobby, the humiliated woman walking out of the gala. Her breath snagged in her throat. Adrian straightened slowly, handing the sketchbook back to Noah. His movements were controlled, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, locked on the boy with a jolt of recognition that rippled across his face. It was like watching a fortress crumble. Noah blinked up at him, wide-eyed. "Sorry, mister," he said softly. Adrian swallowed, his lips parting. His gaze flicked between Noah and Alina, and in that instant, understanding dawned with brutal clarity. The boy's eyes, his jawline, was as though Adrian were staring into a mirror of his own past. Alina's pulse hammered. She reached Noah in 2 strides, pulling him close, shielding him with her arm. "Come on, sweetheart," she said tightly. "We need to go." But Adrian's voice followed, low and hoarse. "Alina." Her name on his lips was like a ghost, resurrected. She froze for a fraction of a second, then forced her feet to move. "Not here. Not now." Noah looked up at her, puzzled. "Mom, do you know him?" The question cut deep, sharper than she expected. Alina tightened her grip on his hand. "We're leaving," she said firmly. Behind her, Adrian remained rooted in place, watching as they disappeared into the crowd. His chest constricted, his carefully built world collapsing under the weight of a truth he had never imagined. He had a son. Adrian Cole had sat through countless board meetings that tested his patience, had stared down rivals who tried to bring his empire to its knees. But nothing had shaken him the way that little boy's eyes had. Storm gray, his storm gray. That night, Adrian didn't sleep. He paced the length of his penthouse, city lights sprawling endlessly beyond the glass walls, but all he saw was the boy, his boy. The resemblance was undeniably tilt of his chin, every flicker of curiosity in his gaze. The realization struck like a blade. Alina had carried his child in silence. She had left him, humiliated, despised, and she had done it while bearing his blood. Guilt coiled tight in his chest. He remembered the gala, The sharpness of his words, the way he had spat judgment without listening. Pride had guided his hand then, but pride now felt like ash by dawn. A single thought had lodged in his mind. He had to see them again. The next afternoon, he returned to the plaza, scanning every corner with the hunger of a man searching for redemption. He found nothing. Days turned into weeks. He sent quiet inquiries, told assistants to comb through school registrations, library memberships, anything that might lead him to the boy. Adrian had built an empire on information, on knowing more than his competitors before they moved, but finding Alina proved harder than any corporate conquest. She had vanished from his world so thoroughly that it was as if she had planned it, and perhaps she had not. When he finally discovered her address, modest townhouse in a quieter neighborhood, he stood across the street for nearly half an hour, palms sweating, heart pounding in a way that felt foreign. He had faced billion-dollar deals with less fear than he felt approaching that door. He raised his hand to knock, but the door opened first. Noah bounded down the steps, backpack bouncing, his laugh carrying into the street. Behind him, Alina followed, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face softer than he remembered yet lined with strength. She glanced at her son with pride, unaware of the man watching from across the street. Adrian's chest constricted. He wanted to run forward, to demand an explanation, to beg forgiveness. Instead, he stayed frozen, an outsider staring at the life that should have been his. When Alina finally saw him days later, it was in the least expected place, the library cafe. She had just set her laptop on the table, Noah scribbling superheroes beside her. When a shadow fell across the page, Alina, her body went rigid. She looked up slowly, meeting eyes she hadn't dared to face in 7 years. Adrian stood there, immaculate as ever, but something had changed. The arrogance in his posture was fractured by something raw, almost desperate. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply, her voice low enough not to draw attention. "I had to see you." His gaze flicked briefly to Noah, then back to her. "Both of you." Her pulse spiked. She shifted, placing herself subtly between Adrian and her son. "You don't belong in his life." Adrian's jaw clenched. "He's my son." The words landed like a thunderclap. Noah looked up, curious. "Mom, go pick out a book, sweetheart," Alina said quickly, forcing a smile. She waited until Noah had darted off toward the shelves before she turned back to Adrian, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to claim him," she hissed. "You forfeited that right the night you humiliated me in front of an entire company. The night you called me." Her voice broke, but she caught it before the word cheap could surface. Adrian flinched, as if struck. "I was wrong. I was blind. Alina, you destroyed me," she cut in, her tone trembling with fury. "You don't get to show up years later and pretend you can fix it with apologies." "I don't want to fix it with words," he said, his voice hoarse. "I want to be here, for him, for you." Alina let out a bitter laugh. "For me? You made sure I'd never forget what I was worth to you." Nothing. The cafe clattered with ordinary life around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of students. But at their table, the air was charged, thick with old wounds. Adrian leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Let me explain. At least give me that chance." Elena's hands shook as she closed her laptop. "You don't get a chance. You had it, and you chose pride over love. Now you live with it." She stood before he could answer, calling for Noah. Together, mother and son walked out, her spine rigid, her hand tight around his small one. Adrian remained seated, staring at the empty chair across from him. For the first time in years, he felt powerless, but he also felt determined. He wasn't going to let her slip away again. Adrian was not a man accustomed to being ignored. In the corporate world, his calls were answered within minutes, his meetings granted on his terms, his presence impossible to dismiss. But Alina Hart proved to be the one opponent he could not outmaneuver. After their encounter in the cafe, she avoided him with a precision that made him almost admire her resolve. Emails went unanswered, calls blocked. Even a letter slipped into her mailbox was returned unopened. She had rebuilt her life behind walls he could not scale. Yet Adrian persisted. Not with the arrogance that once defined him, but with something else, something he barely recognized in himself. Humility. He began showing up at Noah's school plays, standing at the back, careful not to be noticed. He donated quietly to the library, where Alina volunteered, ensuring the children's program thrived. He didn't announce himself, didn't demand recognition. He simply tried to be present, a shadow offering what little he could. But shadows, Alina knew, could still darken the light. One evening, she found him waiting on the townhouse steps. The sun had dipped low, painting the street in copper. Noah had run ahead with a neighbor's kid, leaving her momentarily alone. "Please, Alina," Adrian said as she approached. His voice was low, almost pleading. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." She halted, keys clutched tight in her hand. Every instinct screamed to walk past him, to protect the fragile peace she had built. But there was something in his face, a rawness, a fracture in the man who once seemed unbreakable, that made her pause. 5 minutes, she echoed, her tone sharp. "Do you know how much damage you caused in 5 minutes once?" His jaw tightened. "I know, and I live with it every day. I see your face in my memory, and I hear the words I said. I can't take them back, but I can try to make amends." Alina laughed bitterly. "Amends? You think standing on my steps erases years of struggle? Do you have any idea what it was like to carry a child alone? To wake up at 3 in the morning with nothing in the fridge, but still find a way to smile at him?" Her voice shook, rising despite her effort to steady it. "You weren't there when he took his first steps, when he said his first word. You weren't there when he was sick, and I thought I'd lose him. I was alone. And I chose it that way because you taught me what relying on you would cost." Adrian's shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. He had faced down hostile boards, ruthless rivals, but nothing compared to the truth spilling from her lips now. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly. "And maybe I don't deserve him either, but he deserves to know me. Not the man I was, but the man I'm trying to be. Please, don't take that from him." Elena's eyes stung. She hated that a part of her wanted to believe him, that the sincerity in his voice tugged at the old wound she had fought so hard to scar over. But then she remembered the girl she had been, the one who stood humiliated, under glaring lights while he called her nothing. She couldn't let that girl down. "You don't get to decide what he deserves," she said, her voice steady now. "I do, because I'm the one who stayed." Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. Adrian's eyes searched hers, as if looking for some crack in the armor, some place where he could slip through. But Elena's gaze held firm. Finally, he nodded once, the smallest gesture of defeat. "Then I'll wait," he said. "Even if it takes the rest of my life. I'll wait for the chance to prove I can be the father he needs." Alina turned, without answering, her hand trembling as she unlocked the door. She stepped inside, closing it firmly behind her. On the other side, Adrian remained still, the fading light washing over him. For the first time in years, he felt the full weight of what it meant to be powerless. Yet beneath the despair, a spark of determination lingered. He would not walk away again. Inside, Alina leaned against the door, her breath unsteady. She listened to the quiet footsteps fading down the street, and only then let herself slide to the floor. Noah's laughter floated from the kitchen, pure and unbroken. She pressed her forehead against her knees, torn between fury and something more dangerous, hope. Because even as she vowed never to let him back in, a part of her feared she already had. Adrian Cole was not a man who apologized with words alone. He knew that promises, when unaccompanied by proof, were were worth less than the ink used to write them. And so, after Elena's refusal, he resolved to show her through action. He began quietly. Noah's school suddenly received funding for new computers, a gift that arrived anonymously but bore Adrian's signature in the details, his insistence on the highest security software, his demand that every student benefit equally. The children's wing of the library received renovations, the reading rooms filled with beanbags and bright murals. Even the diner, where Elena once worked, though she had long left it behind, was refurbished under the guise of a corporate outreach initiative. He told no one, least of all her, but he knew she would notice eventually. Elena did. She recognized the fingerprints of his influence in the sudden improvements around her world. At first, she felt a bitter twist of anger. He thought he could buy redemption, as though plaster and paint could erase nights of hunger, as though a check could fill the silence of those first lonely years. Yet anger tangled with something else up. Reluctant awareness that the gestures were not about flaunting power. They were quieter, humbler than the man she once knew. It unsettled her. The true test came one late evening. Elena had stayed late at a community event, signing copies of her newest book for a small crowd. Noah, exhausted, had curled up on a chair with his sketchbook. The night air was sharp when they stepped outside, the parking lot mostly empty. She was juggling bags and trying to coax Noah awake when headlights flared too close. A car skidded around the corner, its driver careless, speeding through the lot. "Mom?" Noah cried, as the bag slipped from her arms. Before she could react, a figure lunged from the shadows. Adrian. He pulled them both back, his arm a shield, as the car screeched past. Tires screamed, the stench of burnt rubber filling the night. Elena clutched Noah, heart pounding, staring at Adrian in shock. "Are you both all right?" His voice was rough, his hand still steadying her arm. She yanked back, the old instinct of defense flaring. "What are you doing here?" "I've been keeping watch," he admitted, not bothering to soften the truth, just in case. Her anger flared. "You had no right. Noah could have been hit." His voice cracked raw. "If I hadn't," she swallowed the words, torn between fury and the undeniable reality that he had saved them. Noah clung to her side, wide-eyed, glancing between the two adults. "Mom," he whispered. "What's happening?" Elena forced calm into her tone. "It's all right, sweetheart. We're fine." She turned back to Adrian, her eyes blazing. "This doesn't change anything." Adrian nodded once, but there was no victory in his expression, only a quiet determination. "I know, but I'll keep showing up anyway." Later that night, after she tucked Noah into bed, Elena sat in the dim light of her desk lamp, staring at the blank page before her. Her hands shook as memory surged: the gala, the humiliation, the endless lonely nights. But tonight those memories were tangled with a new image. Adrian's arm shielding them, his voice breaking as he admitted he couldn't stay away. Her pen hovered above the paper. She didn't know whether to write him as the villain he had been, or the man she had glimpsed tonight. She pressed the pen down anyway, because the story was far from over. Nathan Cole had never been a man who sought conflict. His strength lay in quiet persistence, in the steady way he showed up when others faltered. For nearly a decade, he had been Elena's anchor, never demanding, never pushing, always present, which was why the sight of Adrian Cole standing in Elena's driveway one late afternoon sent a surge of protective anger through him. Nathan had arrived with a bag of groceries, the same ritual he'd kept since Noah's infancy. He enjoyed the rhythm of it, Elena opening the door with tired eyes, but a soft smile. Noah bounding forward to see what snacks might be hidden in the bag. But this time, the tableau was broken. Adrian's sleek car gleamed at the curb, and the man himself stood on the porch. Speaking low to Elena, Noah was at the window, peering out with curiosity. Nathan's heart tightened. "Elena," Nathan said, as he climbed the steps, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "Everything all right here?" Elena stiffened, glancing between them. It's fine, she said quickly, though her tone betrayed tension. Adrian straightened, eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Nathan. And you are? Nathan, he replied evenly, setting the grocery bag down. Her neighbor, her friend, the one who was there when she needed someone. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Adrian's jaw flexed. He had spent his life commanding rooms, cowing rivals, but this man met his gaze without flinching. So you've been helping raise my son. The emphasis on "my" was deliberate, a spark waiting for tinder. Nathan didn't rise to it. He folded his arms, calm but firm. I've been helping Elena. Noah is hers first. Don't forget that. Elena's throat tightened. She hated being the rope in this silent tug of war, hated the way both men's eyes flicked to her, like she was the one who could declare victory. Enough, she said sharply. This isn't a contest. Adrian's voice softened, almost breaking. I'm not trying to fight you, Elena. I'm trying to be part of what I should have been from the start. And where were you? Nathan asked quietly, his words sharp because they were true. When she worked herself to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. When she thought she might lose the baby because she couldn't afford proper care. Where were you when she sat up all night with a feverish toddler and no one to call? Because I was there. The confession landed heavy. Elena closed her eyes, memories flashing the snow-shoveled paths. The late-night grocery bags, the hours Nathan had rocked Noah so she could breathe. He had been her witness, her partner in survival, even if she had never named it love. Adrian flinched as if struck. He wanted to argue, to claim he hadn't known. But the truth silenced him. Noah burst out the door then, breaking the tension with his bright voice. Mr. Nathan, did you bring cookies? Nathan smiled, kneeling to ruffle the boy's hair. Of course. Chocolate chip, your favorite. Adrian watched, a muscle ticking in his jaw. It was a scene he should have known his son, laughing with a man who wasn't him, trusting him, leaning on him. The sight gutted him. But instead of anger, he felt a hollow ache. This was the cost of his pride. Years stolen, moments gone. Elena, Adrian said quietly once Noah darted inside. I can't change the past, but I can choose now. Please let me try. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was firm. Trying doesn't erase the scars. And don't think for 1 second that showing up now gives you equal footing. Nathan was here when everything broke. You weren't. The words lodged deep, but Adrian nodded slowly. Then I'll earn it, even if it takes the rest of my life. That night, Elena sat at her desk long after Noah fell asleep. Nathan had left quietly, pressing her shoulder in a gesture of steady reassurance. Adrian's words still echoed in her head, colliding with Nathan's presence. 2 men. One who had shattered her, one who had carried her through the pieces. Her pen hovered over the paper. But the story she wanted to write refused to come. Instead, she found herself staring out the window at the dark street, wondering if redemption was possible, or if some wounds were carved too deep. For the first time in years, Elena allowed herself to admit she didn't know the answer. The storm rolled in without warning. The sky, clear only hours before, churned with dark clouds, wind lashing through the quiet neighborhood. By evening, rain hammered the townhouse windows in sheets. Elena paced the living room, her nerves sharp. Noah had gone to an after-school art program across town, and she was waiting for him to return on the late bus. But the phone call shattered the night. Ms. Hart. The voice on the other end was tight, urgent. There's been an accident on Route 17. A bus slid off the road in the storm. Your son's name is on the passenger list. Emergency services are already on the scene. Elena's knees gave out. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Noah, she whispered, her voice breaking. She barely registered how she got outside, fumbling with her coat as rain drenched her hair. By some twist of fate or perhaps because he had been circling near again. Adrian's car pulled up in front of her. Townhouse, Alina. His window slid down, panic in his eyes. What happened? She could barely form the words. Noah, bus accident. Route 17. Adrian was out of the car before she finished, opening the passenger door. Get in now. She hesitated for only a second, then slid inside. The leather smelled faintly of cedar. The engine growled to life, and they sped into the storm. The drive was chaos, windshield wipers thrashing, headlights barely cutting through the sheets of rain. Alina sat rigid, fists clenched, every muscle coiled with terror. Adrian's hands gripped the wheel like steel. We'll get there, he said, his voice steady but tight. We'll get to him. You don't know that? Alina snapped, tears burning her eyes. You don't know if he's... Her voice broke. Adrian's throat worked. He's strong. He's ours. He'll be all right. The word ours cracked something inside her. She pressed her fists to her mouth, willing herself not to unravel. When they reached the scene, flashing lights painted the rain-slick asphalt red and blue. The bus had skidded into a ditch, its side crumpled, windows shattered. Emergency crews swarmed, pulling children to safety. Alina stumbled out before the car stopped moving, her shoes sinking into mud. Noah, she screamed, her voice raw. Mom! The cry cut through the storm. She spun to see Noah wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, sitting on the tailgate of an ambulance. His face was pale, his lip trembling, but he was alive. Alina sobbed as she ran to him, gathering him into her arms. Oh, sweetheart. Thank God, thank God. Adrian was right behind her, his hand hovering over Noah's small shoulder, his face a mask of anguish and relief. I was so scared, Noah whispered, clutching Alina's coat. It's all right, she soothed, kissing his damp hair. You're safe now. Adrian finally spoke, his voice rough. He's a brave boy. Noah looked up, eyes flicking between them. I thought I wasn't gonna see you again, he whispered to Alina, then hesitated as he glanced at Adrian. Both of you. The words pierced through the night. They bundled Noah into the back seat, Alina cradling him while Adrian drove. By the time they reached the townhouse, Nathan was already there, drenched from the rain, pacing the porch like a caged animal. When he saw them, relief flooded his features. He rushed forward, pulling the door open. Thank God, he breathed, reaching for Noah. Are you all right, buddy? Noah nodded weakly, curling into Nathan's embrace for a moment before reaching back for Alina. The scene fractured Adrian. He stood in the doorway, soaked and silent, watching another man hold his son, comfort him with ease that came from years of earned trust. Alina noticed the tension, the unspoken weight pressing into the small living room. She settled Noah onto the couch, tucking a blanket around him, before facing both men. Enough, she said, her voice sharp despite the tremor underneath. Tonight isn't about who was there, or who wasn't. It's about him. He's safe. That's what matters. Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. Adrian said nothing, his eyes fixed on Noah, who was already drifting to sleep. Later, when the storm eased and Noah was tucked into bed, Alina found herself standing in the kitchen with both men. The air was thick, charged. Nathan broke the silence first. You can't keep circling like this, Adrian. You hurt her. You abandoned her. And now you're here, trying to claim a role you didn't earn. Adrian's gaze was steady. I didn't abandon her. I was blind, I was proud, and I believed lies I should have seen through. I will regret that until my last breath, but I will not regret wanting to be his father now. Being a father isn't about showing up when it suits you, Nathan said sharply. It's about the years in between, the nights, the sickness, the fear. You can't just erase that. I know I can't erase it, Adrian said, his voice low. But I can add to what comes next. I can stand beside him now, and tomorrow, and every day after, if she let me. Both men turned to Alina, then her gazes heavy with expectation. She stood frozen, her back against the counter, her heart pounding. Nathan, the man who had carried her through every storm, who had been there when she had nothing. Adrian, the man who had shattered her once, but tonight had held the wheel steady through the storm, who had saved them from a careless driver weeks before, who had looked at Noah like the boy was the only truth that mattered. Her throat tightened. "I can't decide this tonight," she whispered. "Not when the sound of that bus still echoes in my head. Not when my son's life was just nearly taken." She looked at both of them, her voice firm despite the tears brimming. "But I know this, my son comes first. Always. If either of you forget that, you're out." Silence followed, thick and unyielding. Nathan's expression softened into understanding. Adrian's shoulders bowed under the weight of her words, but he nodded. Acceptance etched into the lines of his face. For now, the decision remained unwritten, a story still unfolding. In the days after the accident, the world seemed to slow. Alina moved through her routines with a heightened awareness, as though every sound, every breath from Noah was a reminder of how close she had come to losing him. She found herself lingering longer at his bedside, brushing her fingers through his hair as he slept, whispering promises she hadn't voiced since he was a newborn. But alongside the gratitude was something else, and unease she couldn't shake. Because the storm hadn't just brought fear. It had brought Adrian back into her orbit with a force she couldn't ignore. He didn't press. That surprised her most. In the past, Adrian had been a man of force, a storm in tailored suits. But now, he hovered at the edges. He came by with groceries, always leaving them on the porch without knocking. He dropped off art supplies for Noah at school, never attaching his name, but always obvious in the choice paints, brushes, sketchbooks far beyond what the school budget could afford. And when he did appear, it was never with demands. It was with questions. "How's he doing? Is he sleeping better? Do you need anything?" It unsettled Alina more than his arrogance ever had. One evening, she found herself watching him through the kitchen window as he stood in the yard, helping Noah fix the chain on his bicycle. The boy's laughter carried on the warm breeze, his small hands smudged with grease as Adrian patiently guided him. Nathan stood beside her, arms crossed, his jaw tight. "You see what he's doing?" Nathan said quietly. Alina flinched. "He's helping his son. He's weaving himself back into your life," Nathan countered. "Piece by piece. And I get it. Alana, do. He's his father. That's not something you can erase. But don't forget who carried the weight when he wasn't here." She turned to look at him, her chest aching. Nathan's eyes held no bitterness, only a weary honesty that cut deeper. "I don't need the reminder," she whispered. "Every scar I have is proof of who stayed and who didn't." "And yet," Nathan said, his voice low, "you're watching him right now." The truth of it left her breathless. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Adrian lingered by the porch. Alina stepped outside, arms folded. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said, trying for firmness. "The groceries, the repairs, the gifts." "I know," he said simply. "Then why?" He met her gaze, and for once there was no arrogance, no shield, just quiet sincerity. "Because I don't want you to think I'm here to reclaim what I lost. I'm here to earn what I threw away." Her throat tightened. She hated that a part of her wanted to believe him, that her heart betrayed her every time she saw him kneeling beside their son. But then she remembered the humiliation, the word cheap echoing across a glittering ballroom. Some wounds, no matter how healed, never fully closed. "You don't get to rewrite history," she said softly. "I don't want to," Adrian replied. "I just want to be part of the future." Alina turned away, her eyes burning. The future had never felt so fragile. The days that followed unfolded with a strange tension, like a storm that refused to break. Adrian's presence lingered everywhere, at the edge of the schoolyard, at the back of the library, in the quiet groceries left on the porch. He no longer asked for entry into Elena's world. Instead, he built himself into its edges, waiting for permission she wasn't ready to give. Nathan, by contrast, had always been there. His visits were steady, his laughter woven into Noah's childhood, like a familiar melody. But now, with Adrian shadowing the edges, Nathan's steadiness carried a sharper note. The air between them grew taut, a rope pulled tighter each day. Elena felt the weight of it with every breath. One Saturday afternoon, she returned from errands to find the two men in her kitchen. Adrian was leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled back, a cup of coffee cooling untouched beside him. Nathan stood near the sink, arms folded, his stance protective. The tension was palpable. "What's going on?" Elena asked, setting down her bag. Nathan answered first, his tone clipped. "We were talking, Adrian repeated, his voice low, or finally saying what's been waiting years to be said. Elena's pulse quickened. She glanced between them, but neither man looked at her. Their eyes were locked, the air electric. "You think you can just walk back in?" Nathan said evenly. "You think showing up with money and influence makes up for the nights she cried herself to sleep? For the mornings she skipped meals so the boy could eat? You don't get to erase what you left behind." Adrian's jaw flexed. "I know I can't erase it, but I won't apologize for wanting to be in my son's life. He deserves to know where he comes from." "He knows where he comes from," Nathan shot back. "He comes from her strength, from every sacrifice she made when you weren't here. That's enough." The words landed like a hammer, each one echoing in the small room. Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to stop this battle that seemed to tear open every wound she'd tried to stitch shut. But before she could, a small voice interrupted. "Why are you fighting?" All three turned. Noah stood in the doorway, hair mussed from play, a smudge of marker still on his cheek. His sketchbook dangled from one hand. "Mom," he asked softly, "why are they fighting about me?" Elena's breath caught. She crouched to his level, forcing a smile. "Sweetheart, no one's fighting about you. They're just talking." Noah frowned. "It doesn't sound like talking." His eyes flicked between the two men. "Mr. Nathan takes care of me, but—" He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is he my dad?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena's heart lurched. She had known this day would come, but not like this, not with Stormy eyes watching her, not with both men standing there, their truths colliding. "Noah," she began, her voice trembling, "the truth is, you have a father, and you also have someone who has been like a father. Both of them care about you very much." The boy's gaze shifted to Adrian, studying him with the unfiltered clarity of a child. "Are you my dad?" Adrian's throat worked. He stepped closer, dropping to one knee so he could meet his son's eyes. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Yes," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I'm your dad, and I should have been here all along." Noah blinked, processing. "Then why weren't you?" The question cut deeper than any accusation ever could. Adrian swallowed hard, tears burning his eyes. "Because I made mistakes. Big ones. I believed lies, and I let pride get in the way of love, and I will regret it every day. But I don't ever want to miss another day of your life." Elena's eyes stung as she watched, torn between fury at his absence and the aching sincerity in his words. Noah looked at Nathan then, his brow furrowed. "But Mr. Nathan was here. He fixed my bike. He makes pancakes. He stayed." Nathan's voice was gentle. "That's right, buddy. I stayed because I love you and your mom. That won't ever change." The boy's face crumpled with confusion. "So, do I have two dads?" Elena pulled him into her arms before either man could answer. She pressed her lips to his hair, her heart breaking. "You have two men who love you. That's all you need to know right now." Her voice wavered, but it was firm enough to silence both of them. That night, After Noah fell asleep, Alina stood at the window, staring out at the quiet street. Behind her, the house felt heavy with unspoken words. Nathan lingered in the living room, Adrian just beyond the porch light. Two men, two truths. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, marked not just by age, but by choices. She pressed her hand against the pane, the cool surface steadying her trembling fingers. She didn't know how to choose. Perhaps there was no right choice at all. The tension in the house settled into every corner, like dust that refused to be swept away. For days, Alina moved through her routines in silence. The weight of two men's gazes following her everywhere. Ethan, steady and patient. Adrian, watchful and restless. Noah, sharp for his age, noticed. He noticed the way his mother's smile faltered more often. The way Nathan's visits grew quieter. The way Adrian hovered just close enough to be seen but not touched. Children had a way of feeling the undercurrents adults tried to hide. One evening, after homework and dinner, Noah sat cross-legged on the living room rug, his sketchbook open in his lap. He drew 3 figures, a woman with long hair, a small boy, and 2 tall men standing on either side. "Mom," he said suddenly, holding it up. "Is this our family?" Elena's chest tightened. Nathan looked away, his jaw working. Adrian's hand twitched as though he might reach for the paper, then stilled. Alina sat beside her son, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because families are supposed to match," Noah said simply, "but mine doesn't. Some kids at school have one mom and one dad. Some have just one parent. But I have you, and Nathan, and him." His small finger pointed at Adrian. The room went still. "Do I get to choose?" Noah asked softly. The question struck like lightning. Elena's breath caught, tears burning her eyes. She pulled him into her arms, clutching him as though she could shield him from the very choice he didn't understand he was asking her to make. "No, baby," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's not your job to choose. It's mine, and I'll always make sure you're safe and loved, no matter what." But the words felt like ashes in her mouth, because deep down, she knew the decision wasn't hers alone anymore. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Alina found herself outside on the porch. The air was cool, the stars muted by the haze of the city, but the quiet pressed against her like a bomb. Both men followed, uninvited but inevitable. Nathan leaned against the railing, arms folded, his presence steady as always. Adrian stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, eyes searching her face. "You can't keep living like this," Nathan said gently, "caught between what broke you and what saved you." Adrian flinched but didn't speak. Alina closed her eyes. "You think I don't know that? Every day I wake up and wonder which choice ruins less. If I let Adrian in, I risk breaking again. If I hold on to Nathan, I risk denying my son a father he deserves to know. Either way, I lose." Her voice cracked, raw with exhaustion, "and I'm so damn tired of losing." Silence hung heavy. Nathan's expression softened, though his eyes carried a sadness she'd seen only once before when her mother died, and he had stood beside her at the funeral, silent but unmovable. "You don't owe me anything," Nathan said quietly. "I was here because I wanted to be, not because I expected something in return. If you choose him, I'll survive it. I just need to know you're not choosing out of guilt." Adrian finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "And I'm not asking for love I don't deserve. I just want the chance to be his father. Whatever happens between us, he deserves me, even if I'm imperfect." Alina stared at them both, her heart splitting down the middle. To men, one who had been her ruin, one who had been her rescue, and her son, sleeping upstairs, with storm-gray eyes that mirrored the past and pointed toward the future. She rose, her decision still unspoken, and went inside. She stood by Noah's bed, watching him breathe, his small chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight. She brushed her hand over his hair, whispering, "I'll get it right for you." Somehow, from the hallway, she heard footsteps. Both men had followed her inside, standing silently at the threshold. They didn't speak. They only watched as she tucked the blanket tighter around her son. Noah stirred half asleep, his voice a whisper. "Mom, who's staying tomorrow? Mr. Nathan, or Dad?" Elena's breath caught. She kissed his forehead, forcing a smile through the ache in her chest. "Someone who loves you," she whispered. "Always someone who loves you." His eyelids fluttered shut again. The question drifting into dreams, Elena turned to the doorway, where two men waited, their faces shadowed by the dim light. For a moment, she saw not rivals, but two truth-stew pieces of a fractured story, both claiming a place in her son's world. And she knew the choice would come, sharp and final. But not tonight. Tonight, she chose only this, to keep moving forward. One breath, one day, until the answer revealed itself. Autumn returned, gentler this time. The leaves blushed amber and gold. The air crisp enough to carry the promise of change. Without the violence of storms, Elena sat on a bench near the edge of the park, watching Noah race across the grass with a kite in his hands. His laughter soared higher than the kite itself, bright and unburdened. For all the chaos of the past months, her son remained her constant resilient, joyful, unbroken. Beside the bench lay 2 paper cups of coffee, still steaming. Nathan sat on one side of her, calm and steady as always, his gaze following Noah with quiet pride. On the other side, Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his expression caught between awe and grief as he watched the boy he was only just beginning to know. The symmetry of it might have felt absurd once to men. One past, one present, but now, it was simply her reality. "Look at him go," Nathan said, a smile tugging at his lips. "Kid could outrun the wind." "He's fearless," Adrian murmured, his voice rough. "Did he always have that streak?" Elena's lips curved faintly. "From the day he could walk." For a moment, their voices overlapped, not in conflict, but in a strange harmony. Both men adored the boy, and though the tension between them hadn't vanished, it had softened into something more bearable. Noah tripped then, tumbling into the grass with a laugh before popping back up, kite string still in hand. "Mom, did you see that?" "I saw," Elena called back, her chest swelling. Life wasn't simple now, nor had it ever been. Adrian had slowly, carefully, begun to weave himself into Noah's world. Saturday mornings at the art studio, afternoons spent tinkering with bikes and kites. Never too much at once, never with demands. Just presence. Nathan remained, too still the neighbor who fixed squeaky doors. Still the man who carried groceries. Still the steady hand on Elena's shoulder when the past threatened to resurface. Elena sometimes felt caught between two currents, one pulling toward the familiarity of loyalty, the other toward the possibility of forgiveness. Some days she leaned one way, some days the other. But more and more, she realized the choice wasn't hers alone anymore. It belonged to the boy in the grass, the one with storm-gray eyes and a laugh that could heal anything. As the afternoon waned, clouds drifted across the sun, and Noah ran back, cheeks flushed. He plopped down between them, thrusting the kite string into Adrian's hand. "Your turn, Dad." Adrian froze, the word hanging in the air, like a fragile miracle. His gaze darted to Elena, as though seeking confirmation that he'd heard right. She met his eyes, her throat tightening. But she didn't correct the boy. Nathan cleared his throat, looking away, though a small smile ghosted across his lips. Adrian swallowed hard, taking the string. "All right," he said softly. "Let's see if I can keep it flying." Noah laughed, pressing against his side, and together they launched the kite into the sky again. Elena watched, her heart a storm of contradictions, love and hurt, fear and hope. She felt Nathan's presence beside her, warm and unwavering, and she felt Adrian's transformation unfolding before her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't try to define it. As the kite soared higher, the three of them stood together in the fading light, their shadows long on the grass. The future was uncertain, the past still scarred, but in that moment, with Noah's laughter ringing out and the wind tugging the kite skyward, Alina realized something she had almost forgotten. Life wasn't about clean endings, it was about beginning. Fragile, beautiful beginnings. And this, whatever it was only the start.